show this off.
Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's 12:30 on a Monday afternoon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Chris McElwain and Quinny. We are here, of course, for the next hour. And we're here to talk about Celtic, guys. That's what it's all about on the bulletin. Everything from the performance yesterday to the fan action to what happens next with the boards, the financials. We've not really touched on the financials yet. We've got a few quid kicking about in that big Scrooge McDuck vault. But we'll start off with the performance. Chris and I covered the game yesterday, Quinny. You've not had a chance on here anyway to talk about it. How did you find yesterday's game? It was a very enjoyable game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good. I think with these matches, especially with the way things have been going, you do worry it's maybe like a stupid 1-0 or a 2-0 and you just kind of get out there with the result maybe and no more said than that. But, when I seen the team sheet coming out, I was quite surprised. Me and Chris were chatting about this, I think, in the Acsom chat. I was quite surprised Engels and McKeown didn't actually get the start because they played the Falkirk game and there seemed to be a kind of an A and a B kind of set with some of the positions. But it definitely struck me when I seen the team of this is either going to be make sure there's no egg on our face at the end of this one, or it was a take no prisoners approach. And I think by the end of the game, it's probably it was a take no prisoners. Let's go for it. Let's lift the tone. Let's lift the mood ahead of Wednesday, because for the players and everyone there, that's obviously the only thing they can really control or think about anymore, isn't it? So I enjoyed it. It was good under the sun as well, which is always lovely on a Sunday.
It is. And you know what else I thought was lovely, Quinny? This is just maybe my point of reference growing up as a Celtic supporter, is I look at Partick Thistle, I look at teams like Partick and Falkirk, who are obviously back in the Premiership. I look at teams like that as Premiership teams. Dunfermline's another team that I consider. And I know, it's all about merit. You are where you are because you don't win enough games of football. But it was brilliant to go back to Firhill. And I was just looking behind the goals, actually, where we were shooting into in the first half, thinking to myself, what an advert for Scottish football. It's basically just a mound of overgrown grass. I look at things like that, Quinny. Maybe I'm sad, I don't know. But when somebody's taking a corner kick in a Scottish football ground and behind them is a skip, I think to myself, come on, guys, this is on the TV. Can you not make that look a little bit better? At least paint it or something. Anyway, so let's have a look at some of the performances. I want to start off at the back, Chris, and this isn't starting off with a negative, right? Because I'm going to turn it into a positive, actually. Liam Scales was getting a wee bit of stick yesterday in the match, the live chat. I don't think the central area, I thought that the fullbacks were fine. I don't think the central area played particularly well. And if we did play like that on Wednesday night, I think we could be punished, which is a wee bit of a concern. I know we were talking about the length of the grass, it was dry, etc., etc. But it was a wee bit slack, I felt, between Sinisalo, Scalesy and Carter Vickers. If there's a negative, that's it, Chris. Let's get it out of the way.
Yeah, it was a bit sloppy at times. Some decisions that were a bit dubious. I think the pitch did play a part because I think the ball wasn't moving where the players intended. But all the players had to contend with that on both sides. So I think if we played like that against, with the greatest respect to Partick Thistle, but if we played like that against European opposition, I think we would have been punished. So even though you're playing in variable conditions, I think you have to keep your concentration levels up, and I think you have to do the basics and keep it simple. And when you see the ball getting caught under CCV's feet a couple of times, and you see some misplaced passes from Sinisalo, and then Scales tries to bring the ball out, gets caught, if you're struggling and there's evidence that you're struggling to play a certain way, well, tone it down, play it simple, keep it safe. I think that's the only, as you say, very, very, very minor criticism of what was a very good performance is I think, when you're in those positions where, there's a bit of unsureness or insincerity about the what you can do, just do it simple, just keep it nice and easy. And I think, that's what we need on Wednesday. I just want my defenders to defend, do the basics, let the players in front of them take the responsibility.
The other thing I would throw into the mix, though, if we're talking defence, guys, is on the left, Kieran Tierney plays a full game, which had been raised time and time again on here over the last few weeks. And on the right, we've got a guy coming in, Quinny, who I think did impress over the last two pre-seasons when he got minutes in the friendly games. But he's been thrust into this team due to injuries. And I like the look of him. He's raw. He really is. He looks like a bit rough around the edges and all that. And I'm pretty sure that that'll all be refined by playing alongside the experienced players and campaigners around about him, and obviously being managed by Brendan Rodgers. But what I would take from that is, we do have talent. We just don't see enough of it, Quinny. He's come in, and as I say, he's raw. He's not perfect, but I'm glad he's there. He gives I don't know, it's almost as if he gives an energy to the side, and I think we've been missing that recently from the youngsters coming through, Quinny.
Yeah, Colby Donovan's certainly a player I think is easy to be excited about. He's got that kind of good on-pitch persona where on the ball and in and around it, even if he's at the wrong side of whatever's happening in play, doesn't get flustered, doesn't really, catch a nosebleed or anything like that. One thing that we did see from him at the weekend that I thought was really interesting was he actually got a pretty good shot of his left foot a few times. He had a shot from the edge of the box, and he had a few passes that came like inside the pitch on his left foot. And, that kind of caught my eye. And I was thinking to myself, I think the last time we had somebody that, you could say had that same sort of versatility or whatever was Juranovic. And, we've seen how important he was as a kind of, not the same way that Taylor was or other players have been, but he was a kind of playmaking fullback in his own right in regard, in terms of how he cut himself around the pitch for the brief time he was here. So I really like a lot of him. I said after the Kilmarnock game, 2 or 3 more performances like that, and he'll probably elevate himself ahead of Ralston in the pecking order. And, like this Wednesday, if he does play, Brendan said on Friday, Ralston and Trusty are now back in the group as of like today, essentially. So, like, who knows what that means for Donovan on Wednesday necessarily. But if he is to play the game there, really accelerates his kind of progression, I think. You're then looking at Kilmarnock away, Partick away, Serbia away. Is like 3 really big, like, coming of age matches almost for a guy like him. So I think he's really easy to be excited about. And like you say, that's a sort of element you at least want the academy filling out with. We've seen the Barrowfield Centre being unveiled recently as well. And you at least want the youth at the very minimum to keep the squad afloat. Backup right backs and strikers from the bench and wingers that you can give minutes to here and there. And at the very least, he's certainly looking already that he can fill into that void. So yeah, I thought he was definitely a positive of the weekend, as is Tierney getting the 90, which I thought was a big surprise, him starting and getting on that day, So and from the words that Brendan said post-match, it felt like that was like almost like a mental milestone for everyone involved, like just checking that off the to-do list almost. Don't know how often he will be asked to do it, but maybe for him and how much he unloads in the time he's on the pitch, it's maybe a bit more of a, oh no, I do, I can go 90, but I'm going to leave it out in 70, rather than, because it's felt like the second half of games, he's maybe not quite as free flowing up the line and stuff like that, and eventually gets subbed off and that kind of thing. So hopefully that's the beginning of a wee upward turn for all of the defence, maybe.
I hope so. You mentioned Juranovic, and I also almost cut in to say, how dare you, when you said Donovan was ahead of Ralston, but I do agree. So there's 2 things I want to talk about. First is...
Maybe almost.
Yeah, this. If I'm asked the question, and if Ralston is deemed fit on Wednesday night, I'm going to stick with Donovan, Quinny. Because how else can you ever develop a young player if you don't? Martin O'Neill agrees. Colby should start midweek. Can't be bringing in Ralston if he's not going to be up to speed. And by the way, I do think there's elements of Ralston's game that could well be better. But what I like about Donovan is the energy that he's brought to the table. And you mentioned something there, a very good point, where he's maybe broke ranks a wee bit and tried a shot from distance. We're not doing enough of that. We're not doing enough of it, Quinny. And when I seen Donovan doing that as well, I thought, kudos to you. But you brought up Juranovic, and who does he play for? Union Berlin. Who else plays for Union Berlin? Only Scottish football's most expensive player of all time. The second best sportsman ever to be born in Kirkcaldy, Ollie Burke. Now, we spoke about this, guys, right? There was a moment last season where I thought Brendan Rodgers was going to buy him. Remember, he actually brought his name up, remember? Oh, AGSC Tech, you're talking my language. The big story
this is a good few minutes before you mentioned Ollie Burke, by the way. They anticipated. They knew.
Yes. But can I just point out, Chris is on the comments today, so I'm not bringing up the Burke comments. Ollie Burke's hat-trick in the Bundesliga against Frankfurt as a fellow Fifer is PJD campaigning now to re-sign, what is that? Bundesliga spiel, joint third top scorer. I should have stuck in it German, right? Not quite. But I did laugh last season when Brendan Rodgers name dropped him out of nowhere. Remember that? Talked about Oliver Burke. What an incredible career he's had, Quinn. Can you explain it to me? Because see, when you watch that hat-trick in isolation, you think the galloping nature of his runs, the strong running, he scores 3 different goals, he looks the part. But no, I don't want to sign him.
The thing with Ollie Burke and why he works in the Bundesliga, because he has played Championship in England, of course, Premier League in England, and obviously with us, it wasn't. He had like 1 or 2 good games, didn't he? Scored 1 or 2 goals, it wasn't all.
I remember
terrible,
him at Tynecastle having that big gallop. He's definitely a physical player, certainly.
But it's kind of the archetype of everything that Rodgers talks about, because if you just look at him for raw minerals, like he's a big athlete, like a proper, professional player in that way, and. Yeah, like in Germany, like he's at Union Berlin, he was at Bremen last year. These type of teams, like particularly with the forwards, they need to be very strong. They need to be as quick as possible, and that's kind of like the base camp. And then after that, it's technique and all the rest of it. And it's one of these funny ones, because if you put him into any other top 5 league, he's probably nowhere near as effective. But he does suit German football quite oddly, in the way I've seen him certainly the odd occasion here and there play. So yeah, fair. Like, if you watch him, he just looks like a Bundesliga player. He doesn't really stand out for better or worse than it. He's just in the crowd, if you know what I mean, of Bundesliga guys. So he's it's one of those funny examples in football of someone in a particular place just works.
Yeah, and by the way, it takes me back to my list. The following are Scottish players. the most expensive Scottish players with a cumulative transfer fees. Ollie Burke, at the last count, €36.9 million. Unless there was a transfer fee to his new club, that's even higher. Jordan Rhodes, remember Jordan Rhodes played for Scotland a few times. 34.7 million. That's incredible. Scott McTominay, 1 transfer, €30.5 million. And Kieran Tierney, €28.4 million, which was around 25 million quid. I always find the next one quite interesting because his transfers happened so long ago. Duncan Ferguson, 28.3 million. So yes, Ollie Burke, he's coming back to remind us of just what a fine Kirkcaldy specimen he is. Before we get into the midfield then, gents,
Can I just say to you, see on that Duncan Ferguson note, I was listening to, and I know you're a wee bit of a fan of it as well, but I was listening to the overlap last week, and they had, what was the guy's name? Des Walker or something like that?
Oh, that's right.
Des Walker, yeah.
And he was telling a story about Nottingham Forest rejecting £6 million for him in 1989.
Wow.
And that just made me think again about all the chat we've had here with Celtic and transfer fees and whatever, And I know at that time he's like an England player, Nottingham Forest in Europe and stuff like that. So it's the top of the game. But £6 million or euros or whatever in the early 90s and late 80s.
That's incredible.
Funny.
Was it an Italian club that wanted him,
yeah,
because he eventually went to Sampdoria? That makes sense. That makes sense. And he was a fantastic player for Forest and England, Des Walker, at that time. But yeah, it's incredible actually when you look at Duncan Ferguson's transfer fees. We picked up Liam Scales for about 500 grand, and I do want to point this out because there was a wee conversation we had yesterday amongst the Acsom troops when we were talking about the situation at the back, and we were talking about recruitment, and that's going to come into the conversation, I think, for the rest of the season, in actual fact. But what we always go back to, guys, is this £26 million question. It's almost a go-to, it's a default when people are trying to say, don't trust Brendan Rodgers with a chequebook, because what you get is you get these 3 guys for 26 million and have no lived up to the hype, right? Austin Trusty's already been mentioned by Quinny. My point here, and this was the point I was trying to make with the lads yesterday, is I don't know who identified those 3 players, but here's my thought process on this. Adam Eder spoke about Brendan Rodgers getting in touch with him 3 days before he signed, right? And this was on loan. And it looks like the old Rodgers Rolodex came into play, right? He was aware of the guy from being down south. The other players, Arnie Engels, Austin Trusty, maybe he knew about Trusty, obviously having played at Arsenal, Birmingham, Sheffield United. But Arnie Engels, I'm pretty sure that would have been data-driven recruitment that found this player who was playing with Augsburg in the Bundesliga. Regardless, right, there's 3 guys, and we're led to believe that those 3 names would be given to Brendan Rodgers, and he would say yes or no in regards to that. And when you look at the Champions League performances last season, where they all play 10 games, they didn't all start 10, you would think, well, obviously they're part of Brendan's plans. What he's shown this season is he feels no obligation to play a player who isn't his signing. Right, he's shown that even in the Europa League squad. But my point is this: I was having a look at the initial interest that we had in those three players, and the initial interest we had in Austin Trusty was at £5 million, and the chat around Sheffield United at that point was, we'll be doing well to get £5 million. We ended up spending £6 million on him, right? And the Engels, the chat around Engels, the initial chat was €6.5 million. They wanted a wee bit more than that, but we ended up spending £11 million on Arnie Engels. And the third one, of course, was Hellas Verona were working a loan to buy deal in the January that we got Adamida. And the fee that they were talking about, this is one of the worst, was £3.5 million. Now, Norwich wanted a wee bit more than that, guys, but I don't think £8.5 million to £9.5 million was going to be quoted. That's not down to Brendan. That's down to our lack of negotiating skills. When the CEO and Chris Mackay go and speak to the representatives of those three players, and you should be going into that room being able to say, well, you know what, we're going to get Trusty for £5 million here. We're probably going to get Adamida for maybe £6 million and get it into the loan deal, right? So it can't change. And we're going to get Arnie Engels for maybe 7 or 8. Look at what we spent. That's down to the negotiating skills, Chris. That's down to the issues that we have with the so-called recruitment team.
Yeah, and listen, it's a fair assumption, and you know, we appreciate that there's an element of speculation about that because we don't have the insight, but it does seem to add up, right? And I think you're right. Our negotiating practice and our recruitment practice has consistently shown that we get players late in the window, largely. Not all the time, and we get some business done early, you know, such as this, but the players that we really need, or the players that you believe are our top targets, seem to be, you know, taking either a very long time to negotiate, or it gets to the point where we don't really make our firm move until, you know, the last week's the window. And at that point, if you hit a stumbling block and you're negotiating in terms of price, you're the one that's under the cosh because, you know, the selling club has all the power. You know, they say, well, if you want this player, here's our target fee. You need to hit that or get as close to it as possible. And you sort of think, you know, you need to go in there, I think, with a clearly defined strategy, which, you know, maybe they have, maybe it just hasn't been effective. But you have to go in and say, well, if this is a player I want, you do all the profiling, you do all the data-driven work, as you've said, and you find the profile players and you build up your shortlist, and you think, you know, somebody gives that to the manager, but they're obviously saying to Brendan or his coaching staff or both and say, we think he's a good fit because he's got that attribute, he's hits these data marks, and by the way, you'd like to think, you know, he's maybe a good, you know, he's got the adaptability to come and play in Scotland and step up to Europe, and he's got potential. You know, you think all these factors would have to be included. But then you listen to someone like Alan Morrison, you know, who's, you know, really understands the data-driven model. And Alan looks at a player like Arnie Engels and says, yeah, good profile player, you know, very talented, definitely, you know, a high-value player, but not a like-for-like or easy fit into our system. And you sort of think, well, okay, if that's the case, why is that not being picked up as part of the scouting and the recruitment process? Is that something Brendan's aware of, or does he find that out the first time he decides to play the player and he says, well, actually, you know, does pretty well, but, you know, doesn't seem a natural fit for our style of play or the way the players around them play. So I think there's definitely something that's not right, and that's been very tentatively acknowledged in the various communications. I mean, you know, very light touch to say, oh yeah, guys, we got this wrong, you know, but, you know, getting it wrong is one thing. How do you change it? How do you improve it going forward? Because this is not a one-window problem. This has been a problem over multiple transfer windows, right? And, you know, it's easy to point to the manager on these three players in particular and say he wanted them. The club backed them to the tune of 26 million, you got them in. Well, look, backing the manager is great, all for that, right? But this still depends on the recruitment process, the scouting process, the player identification process being as effective as possible, because ultimately if a player says, look, I need 3 players and you know, I want 3 decent players in, and they deliver, well, he's doing that based on, well, you've told me he'll fit there and he's good and that's what he can bring to the table, and then, you know, suddenly you might find out that's not the case. But there's a really interesting point, last point I'll make, and it's something that was mentioned yesterday on commentary, well, one of several good points I thought by Michael Stewart, and the question about that 26 million came up, and it said, well, last season Celtic backed the manager to the tune of 26 million for 3 players, and none of the 3 were in the starting lineup yesterday. And Michael Stewart's very accurate response, I thought, was, yeah, that's fair, but does that mean you don't try? Go and try again? going forward.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you tear it up and throw it away. It just means, look, something about that didn't necessarily hit all the marks, but that doesn't mean that you tear that approach up.
Chris, I agree with you. I thought it was a very good point Michael Stewart made, credit where it's due. But I'm going to go back to the fact that had we spent £20 million for those three players, even if Adam Idah did decide to go to Swansea and we're left with Austin Trusty, £5 million, all right, so he cost 700 grand more than Mike Nawrocki. And if Arnie Engels had cost £8 million and he didn't have that on his shoulders, the fact that he's now Celtic's most expensive player, and we spent 20 million rather than 26, that comes back to our poor process, our poor ability to negotiate. And the actual sample size is far too small. So I agree with you, and I agree with Michael Stewart. It doesn't mean you don't do it again, but you know what? Do the deals better next time. Quinny, I know. Yeah, absolutely. And if we're playing Champions League football this season, Adam Idah's worth more than we got for him. Arnie Engels is worth more than we could get for him, and the same for virtually every other player. Because if you're playing at that level, you can demand the likes of £17 million for Nicholas Kuhn. If you're not, the value of the player's not as high. I mean, that's just basics, isn't it? So, Quinny, I think we need to get away from that. It's almost as if we're being scared back into the submission of only buying players up to the £5 million level.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that through the window, that was the strategy that they were running with in this window, for whether it was like a total budget that they had pre-Champions League qualification or a kind of soft budget per player. It was definitely felt through all the reports and everything that we had. Just to come back on some of the things, I was very much of the opinion, and this is like second-hand info that I read from someone at some point, but I think Tisdale was like a consultant at Augsburg or something like that. And I think he is the reason we signed Engels. I think he's like the man behind that, because you remember when we appointed him, part of the chat was, he helped us out in the summer window with some of the deals before his appointment was official. So I think Engels is firmly a Tisdale signing if we're going to like allocate it to someone. And again, you need to fact check me on the Augsburg thing. I'm fairly certain of that. But as second hand, it's not something I've found myself. I heard someone else talking about it at the time. And I'm also like, and I know he's not really part of this conversation or whatever, but I'm quite convinced like Engels has looked all right this season. I think if he gets one or two big performances under his belt, he could really kick on and break through. And I agree with the data profile, and I had similar conclusions myself when we signed him. Like, I didn't really feel like an obvious fit, but it does feel like the tactic with that and with maybe the likes of your Tunekis and your Yangs and whatever is that we're polishing a diamond up here. So we find a guy like O'Reilly in League One, we find a guy like Engels in the Bundesliga who's at like a bottom end team fighting against relegation, and it's like, okay, can you put them into a dominant team, into an attacking team in a prominent role, and get some of those attributes that we're seeing in these other scenarios actually, develop and grow and whatever. So I get a little bit of the theory behind it, but I do agree it was definitely a square peg for a round hole at the time, and we're still yet to see any kind of development on that. But in terms of how we approach the transfer window, like some people in the chat are talking about it. I was watching Man United Chelsea at the weekend, and I don't know if any of you watched it, right? It was lashing it down, absolutely bouncing off the ground and smashing you in the face, rain, the worst stuff you've ever seen. And at that moment, I was watching Fernandes start over a free kick or something like that, and see all these, it's like, you can't get people to come to Scotland, right? Because it's Scotland, right? Not anything to do with the league or anything like that. It's so untrue. Like, and even when you look at the quality of leagues and stuff like this as well, the players that you see like going into not even other leagues of our standing, but even just other leagues that are not the big ones, players do it all the time. Getting people to go to Scotland, getting people to go to, I don't know, even places like Croatia and Turkey. And I know Turkey spend a bit of money, so fair enough. And, but culturally, there's a huge cross-section all the way across Europe, and all sorts of players move to all sorts of places all the time. And the number one thing that normally makes that happen is dinero, is money. And if you're in an unfashionable part of town, you might need to pay an extra couple of quid to get the player on the weekly or on the wages or whatever, to just agree. And I know we've got like a new set wage structure that's very UEFA friendly, which again just adds into the whole statement thing from before, doesn't it? But we're very compliant, we're very regimented, we've got all of our ducks in a row. But I do think it's naive to not factor in, like, for 2 or 3 players in the squad, you're going to have them here for 2 or 3 years, but they will be out with the structure, because the idea is we're buying this guy from Ajax and he's like an up and coming guy. We're going to make him the star man. So yeah, you pay him a little bit more than you would your your Tenekis or I don't know Balakwishes or whatever. But the idea is he's so good that in 2 years he'll be out of here anyway. You know, we'll be selling him, and you know the world keeps turning, sort of thing. So I do think, and on that same note, that is kind of what we've did with those transfer fees, which is why that's come into my mind with the Engels, with the trust. It's just push the boat out, get the guy, make it happen. But it's like you say, the main point of that is you can't do that and then Indian give on off the back of it, because it did feel like the January window is where we paid the penance for that, because we were crying out for the window to open and someone to jump through it for us, and obviously that didn't happen. And the chat at the time was, oh, we've spent too much in the summer, and there was probably a degree of truth in that. Like you said, Paul John, if we got those 3 guys for 20 million, I've got a lot more confidence that when that window opens, we spend 5 million on somebody day one, you know.
Yeah, we get the striker in, and we might even stay in Europe. So the knock-on effect is palpable. I mean, the other thing I was going to say there is it's been really strange, and it was pointed out yesterday, and I had a wee think about it in relation to Scalesy. I thought Scalesy played all right. He got a decent goal. There was a couple of issues with him and CCV, so I don't know why we point a finger at Scales and never at CCV. My point yesterday, Chris, was that Liam Scales is the best defender we've had this season. But it got me to start thinking about the centre-halves that we brought into the football club, or who have left the football club since Brendan Rodgers came back in. And what about this, right? For me, a waste of money. Nat Phillips, Gustav Lagerbielke, Mike Nawrocki, Yuki Kobayashi was sold under Rodgers' watch. Boston Lawal was sold under his watch, and Stephen Welsh is out at Motherwell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Simpson Pusey's come in, but he's completely out of favour. And we're still playing 2 guys that were there when Brendan Rodgers entered the building, CCV and Scales. The unfancied, unfashionable Liam Scales has already seen off Nat Phillips, Gustav Lagerbielke, Mike Nawrocki, Kobayashi, what was his name? Yuki Kobayashi, only played 5 minutes. Boston Lawal and Stephen Welsh. Liam Scales has seen them all off, and it looks as though he's going to see Simpson Pusey off as well. Who knows what's going on there? But let's give Liam Scales a wee bit of credit on the one hand, Chris, but on the other hand, what are we doing with centre-halves? That's bad recruitment when you look at the numbers there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take both sort of sides of the argument a little bit. I mean, one thing is, do we give the manager a bit of credit as well? I mean, the manager's judging Liam Scales as, at this point in time, his number 1 choice centre-back partner for Carter Vickers, right? So you trust not only what Liam Scales is doing on the park, but you trust the manager's judgment on that. But you're right, when all the centre-backs that you've mentioned, whether they're guys coming through like Lawal, etc., or the ones that were brought in for not unsubstantial amounts of money, you have to think, well, that's surely a failure of recruitment, because even by the law of averages, you'd expect one of those guys at least to get in and make a significant impact. Now, I think Trusty came the closest, right? I mean, Trusty, looked like he was building up a partnership with Carter Vickers. Unfortunately, injury, couple of bad games. So I don't necessarily, I'm not prepared to write Trusty completely off at this point, but I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that at this point in time, given who is currently available and who's been available, Liam Scales is your number 1 choice centre back for that left centre back position. He's a top choice. You can't get away with it. What I would also say though, in a counterpoint, if we were to get our recruitment sorted out and maybe improve our scouting and our player identification, is there potential you could get a better player than Scales? Well, of course there is, right? And there's potential to get a better player than Carter Vickers or any other position, right? That's the point. Recruitment should be always looking to improve on what you have. And I don't mean that to be derogatory or detrimental towards Scales in any way, shape or form. I think the guy has stepped up to the plate every time he's been asked to. But there's also this element of Scales has been in there for 2 seasons now. He still carries that stigma of almost going to Aberdeen, the league he was signed from, the low fee, the unfashionability, I think, as we keep talking about. And I don't know if he's ever going to be the type of player that's going to completely eradicate that, even if he scores more fantastic goals like he did at the weekend there. So there's always going to be this clamouring for go and spend big money and get a top quality centre back in. So it really depends. Do you view Liam Scales as just being a cut above all the recruitment in centre back from the last few years, or is it just the fact that recruitment's been so bad that we simply haven't identified a suitable replacement for that position? Personally, I prefer to give the player the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, maybe Dermot Desmond is good at recruiting players. Who knows? So, Quinny, when we look at... Sorry, that was a joke. Double D, the original Double D. That was a joke, just in case the lawyers let us getting drafted. Right. But when we look ahead to Wednesday, Quinny, I mean, I think it's quite simple. For me, when you look at the back five, the only change you make is Casper comes back in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the way it goes. And I think with the Liam Scales conversation, it's one of these ones where it's all about marginal gains as well, because really, like, over this piece, like, how many games, goals, points is Scales cost us? You know, so really, like, what are you looking to gain by spend? Because again, the number one thing I always say in this chat is, like, if you get someone better than Scales, they're 10 million quid. Like, that is not a cheap player. You know, someone that is definitively going to put him on the bench and keep him out of the team is 10, 12, 15, maybe more. And the thing with defence it's really hard to recruit with, I think for Celtic in particular, is that you've really got like three categories of centre backs. You've got like young guys like our Dane Murrays and the Simpson Pussy kind of mould or whatever. You've then got really the category everyone else is falling into, and that's they're definitely not wet behind the ears, but they're not a veteran. You know, they've not been there, seen it, done it yet. And then you've got that veteran category. And I think if without the veteran in the squad somehow, somewhere, and you can look at clubs all across time and Europe and whatever, if you've not got that leader centre back, it makes it a bit harder, I think, to bring any of the other two categories in and expect them to really like hit the ground running and really maximise. And what you get with Scales and Vickers is two guys in that middle category, but they become like more than the sum of the parts. Like as a pair, they're very effective. They know each other. They space well between one another. They cover for each other, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the gain you can get by doing it our ways. You don't have anyone that's legs are failing them or are injury prone or you're not got a sell on value or all that other malarkey. You get two guys that should be quite close to peak of their powers and, you know, can kind of do a little bit of everything well enough. But when you do go to Naroki's, Lagerbielke's and all these other guys, you're then trying to get them to form a partnership. And, you know, that can be the most challenging part if there's already one there established or one there that's through circumstance been forced together and it's kind of ended up working out. As you said there, Scales and Vickers were here before Rodgers. So it's, you have to spend money to recruit in the defence if you want it to make it better. What do you really gain by making the defence much better? I'm not really sure. Like let's say it's 12 million quid to get a better centre-back than Scales or Vickers or one of them. 12 million quid in the front line is going to get us a bucket more goals than what we've got right now. So it's also a little bit of, I don't know if you'd call that opportunity cost or whatever, but the money's kind of better. You feel the effect of the money for Celtic a lot more in the forward areas, mainly because we've just sold Kyogo, Kuhn and O'Reilly, and that kind of then makes that the thing. So it's kind of one of those ones where if you were to weigh up how much money you've got and look at the squad, it's like, well, how much better could the defence be, like actually, you know, in reality? So it's a weird one, I think.
Can I just jump in on this one, right? Because, and it's not to have a go at Gabby, who has come in with this comment in relation to your point here, Quinny. £10 million to replace Scales. Lol. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up... the reason I'm bringing this up, right, lolling away there, is Nat Phillips, believe it or not, cost us £2 million on a loan fee. And then you look at Lagerbielke, £3 million, Nawrocki, 4.3. Other players who have come in whilst Liam Scales has been in the building, Kobayashi, he was inexpensive. The other one, of course, being Austin Trusty, 6. So what, you know, none of them have displaced Liam Scales as a starting centre half at Celtic. So I think Quinny's comment actually stands up. Yeah. I remember Liam Scales, and I mentioned this yesterday, there was interest from Anderlecht. They were talking £5 million for Liam Scales. That's just the way it is. That's how much he's valued at. And if you're going to bring someone in who definitely replaces Liam Scales, I agree with you, Quinny. You're spending big money, Chris. I don't think that's a radical point to make.
It's not, and I think the point Quinny made there is really, really important. You think about, is that the priority area we need to strengthen to make our team markedly better than it currently is? And I think I would say no. I think we can quite easily win domestically. And it sounds really arrogant, but I firmly believe that with the right additions in forward-going areas, we will dominate domestically with the current backline. I really do. I just think that the backline's good enough. We're not. How many goals have we conceded this season domestically? You know, they're doing their job, right? So give them credit for that. Okay, look, Europe's a step up, but Europe's a step up all over the park, right? But we are a team that wins games largely on the front foot, right? It's our forward line, it's their ability to create chances, score goals, knuckle in the midfield, that kind of thing. And yes, we need strong defensive performances, but we've given strong defensive performances by, using the players that we've had available over the past couple of years. Liam Scales has been there, Carter Vickers consistent, Schmeichel's been there. Before him, it was Joe Hart. AJ has been there for a few years. We're now lucky enough to have Kobe Donovan coming through and the ever reliable Tony Ralston to back up there. Left backs be an issue, but we've been fortunate enough to have GT in there. Now we've got Kieran Tierney. Many of us consider that an upgrade, certainly in the defensive side. So I don't know if that's an area that we could justify going and spending the 10 or 12 or 14 million on for one player to make what I would consider not a huge difference in relation to the fact that actually, if we spent it on a right winger, for example, I think we absolutely improve the squad. Like we improved the first team, by a much larger.
Get off Yang's back, Chris. I can hear you and Martin shouting from the
yeah. I gave Yang plenty of compliments yesterday. I said, do you know, I was thinking about this before we came on, just on the Yang point. Yang for me is what we always talked about as being a project player, young player potential coming in, and Yang has continually found himself in the first team. And because of that, I think it highlights the areas in his game that he's not so good at and he still has to develop. But as I said the other day, if Yang takes his opportunity now, Yang's ability to go one direction, that's upwards. He's got the right opportunity with the right manager, and the right chance to go and cement his place in the team and continue to improve. So the onus is on the player to do it. Do I think he's the best option at right wing that we should have on the team at the moment? No. But if he's there between now and January, I would say, pull your socks up, son. Go and improve and actually show that you can develop and meet the potential that he was obviously signed for.
If you and Martin and I were to pick our Celtic team, Yang would be right wing, Tony Ralston would be right back, and Ollie Burke would be playing centre forward. What do we know? Right.
This is why we're here. This is why we're not.
This is it. This is it. Yes. But by the way, I'm only picking Ollie Burke because he's from the Langtoon, Kirkcaldy. Incidentally, just before we came on live, I've not had a chance to put the link underneath the video, but I'll try and do that tonight once I get home from filming. A Celtic State of Mind have made it into the finals once again of the FCAs. Now, John Hughes points out that we shouldn't really be in any kind of financial conduct authority discussion. Thanks, John. Football Content Awards, that's the ones. And this is, believe it or not, the 11th time in 8 years that we have been finalists. There was a few multi-award nominations along the way. So this time round, we are the best international podcast. We're in the final. There will be a voting link. We will share it across the socials. I've just got to say thank you to every single person who watches the show on a daily basis, comes in, gives us a bit of their opinion, gives us a wee bit of stick. Every single one of you, thank you for tuning in, subscribing to the channel, following us on the socials, coming to our events, buying the merch, all that stuff. And thank you to every single contributor. We've got a great team, Chris and Quinny, obviously, on today. But actually, when you look through the Monday through to Friday, plus the match day, it's all about squads. It's the Acsom squad. And I don't know if I'm a midfield general or I'm a sub. I'm not sure. Kevin Graham reckons he's got a record at underage football for being an unused sub more than any other footballer in Scotland. But, he is an important part of the squad, Kev. Big shout out to you, mate. So thanks, everybody. Best International Podcast. We've won that award a few times. We'll do a wee video at some point between now and when the voting closes with our ace videography team. And thank you very much. It's very humbling when you get nominated for these things, isn't it, Quinny? And it's great to share it amongst the Acsom community, because it is a community. I know that sounds a wee bit, patronising, but we do have a community. We've built a community up. We meet people at the events. We've got the fans on Wednesday night. We meet people who tune in. They come up and they say, "Oh, I love a Thursday when JP's on," or "I love when Big Yogi goes on a rant," or "I love the Oracle on a Friday." All that kind of stuff. So we have built a community, Quinny, and it's an absolute pleasure to be part of it, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I say congratulations again on the nomination. I'm sure he'll do really well again as ever. And thoroughly deserved and well earned.
We, mate, you're a part of this. Come on.
Yeah, I'm not going to be accepting any awards for this. Definitely not. But yeah, no, it's absolutely brilliant to see, and I'm sure you'll do well again. And the community chat is so accurate because, like, you'll know as well as I do. You've already mentioned it, but it's the same names and faces you see in the live chat and in the comment sections, and it's the chat, it's interactions from everyone that supports your channel. Any given channel is what gives it a part of its personality, as well as the people on screen and everything as well. So it's definitely a community effort, from everyone that features on the show, of course, as well as everyone that supports it, sharing and nominating and voting and doing all that heavy lifting stuff, which is maybe a wee bit of hassle out of someone's day. It doesn't take too long, of course, but it makes a huge difference, and people are always happy to do that when they really like the content that they're watching. I think it's a huge testament to you, Paul John, and everyone on the channel.
I would also say, go on the back of one of the comments Chris brought up here, Celtic content creation, fan media in respect to Celtic is sensational, Connie. I know you watch a lot of content, and when I'm working in the studio and the days can get quite long, whatever I'm doing, I'll have something on in the background. Unless I'm typing a really important email and I need to concentrate 100%, I will have something on in the background. And generally speaking, it is content. And I've got to say this, the Celtic space, if you want to call it that, is littered with quality. There's so much great content being created across the board. And I know that obviously with regards to the coming together of the fan movement, the Celtic Fans Collective, what we've seen as well, Quinny, is a coming together of the fan media platforms, all coming together. There really is no needle in respect to that. Everybody just wants the best for the club. Yeah. Sharing ideas. You were in a round table. I think, were you involved in that round table the other week, Quinny, with Tino and the Cynic?
Yeah.
Were you involved in that? So people coming together and creating content as like a round table talking heads, I think we're really, really well served. And we always have been, right back to the fanzine days where I thought Celtic fanzines were untouchable. They were just basically the dawn. They were the best. And, when we go down there, and it's in Leeds this year, I don't want to say we're representing everybody, but I just think it's testament, Chris, to the quality that Celtic content creators put out there on a day-to-day basis.
It is, and look, I know there's been some scrutiny over fan media from certain, let's just say, established mainstream folks recently, which I think was gross.
You and Cameron did a very good video in response to that, though.
Ewan, I mean, I know he takes pelters from various different quarters and probably bites it largely, but my experience, having spoke to the guy, online, and I know testing a few other people, he's a good guy, and I think he does. His viewpoint was that he started in a vein very similar to fan media, and that gave him the grounding and the capability to get as established as he is. But look, listen, I've been very fortunate to be part of Acsom. I've came, and I'm in my second year now, but I was very much someone who latched on to Acsom in particular, but a lot of different fan media, but Acsom gravitated towards when I was going through a pretty tough time in my life. And we've had so many testimonials from people who say that, particularly through times like COVID, when people are looking for a distraction, when they're looking to talk to like-minded people or feel part of a community when maybe they don't have that, out with this platform, and how grateful they are for this content to be available. And that's not I know for a fact that's not something that you take for granted. It's not something that any of us take for granted. And I think it's an incredible testament to how powerful fan media can be, and not, replacing journalists or replacing mainstream media or anything like that. But we have the ability to tap into the various different diverse voices of the supporters. You can discuss issues that maybe aren't quite as focused on in mainstream media, and you build up this camaraderie and this community and this ability to, tackle difficult subjects. And it's never about one voice, and it's never about us saying we're right and everybody else is wrong. It's engagement, it's debate, and it's as I say, that diversity of thought, which is so important. So, yeah, I mean, look, for me personally, really privileged to be part of Acsom. And I know a lot of people maybe don't see a lot of the work that goes on, but believe me, there's a ton of work that goes on between particularly the creators like Quinny and Paul John. And I don't think many people will appreciate just the sacrifice and the commitment to making a platform like this work.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not about just patting each other on the back and all that. As I say, we're going down there, and there are incredible amount of Celtic creators out there, and it's part and parcel. And I think that's the big thing I took from the Ewan Cameron and Jim White spat, is that it's here and it's here to stay. I mean, our next step, and I've discussed it on here, our next step is within this building that I'm sitting in right now. We will have our own set, we'll have our own studio, we'll be broadcasting live rather than dialing in or dialing out. We'll do that. It will still be 12:30 to 1:30 every single day, but it will look a wee bit different. So when we fall out, it's going to be even more real, because you'll be looking at the whites of each other's eyes. You'll not be waiting for them to be quiet on the stream. So that for me is a lot to look forward to. It's down in Leeds. What would happen if us on the chat did a sack the Acsom board?
I think should ban him. What do you think? I think should ban Shadow for that comment.
You've got previous for it, Chris, to be fair.
I was going to say.
Banning regulars. We don't have a board, and we try our best to make sure you're not bored watching us. However, very, very soon will the big move take place to Glasgow. So we'll be away down to Leeds, Elland Road. I've never been to Elland Road. Away down to Leeds, and hopefully we can bring another gong up the road. Looking forward to that. In relation to the weekend as well, we've covered in some depth the performance of the kind of back line, Quinny. There was also the second part, if you like. Well, I suppose you could call it the third part. The open letter was the first part of the action, followed by the way, none of the 7 questions have been answered yet, followed by the 12-minute walk-in at Rugby Park, and then a very visual protest at the weekend where we left no one in any doubt as to who we want to leave this football club. However, it was a shame, though, that when the banners went up, Chris Mackay and Michael Nicholson both got a very important message on their phone at the same time, Quinny. Unbelievable synchronicity, serendipity even. But yes, it was a brilliant effort. Going back to what Chris said there, the behind-the-scenes work, the heavy lifting of everybody involved, but a big shout out to the ultras, because again, nobody does it like our ultras when it comes to displays, right? Everybody that's been involved in this, they are basically just putting in all their own time, all their own effort and creativity and ideas. And what we've seen at the weekend, again, is a coming together, Quinny. And yeah, there was a moment where the Flyers ended up on the park and it slowed things down and all the rest of it. But it wasn't as slow as a negotiating process with Michael Nicholson, was it? So fair play to everybody involved, Quinny.
Yeah, indeed. And, I did think when the camera panned to them and they were on their phone, I was actually listening to the pre-match you guys were doing here. And I was trying to line up with what I could see them, and I'll try to work out who they were in the live chat. Like, also they were tuning in here before the game, weren't they? So
absolutely, yeah, you've nailed it. You've nailed it, Quinny.
Just try to work out who they were. Yeah. Definitely one of them was on, if not both of them. You just know it. So yeah, getting caught red-handed in the live chat pre-match, bad crack for them. And yeah, like, great display. And the delay thing is kind of whatever, but I think it's part of the protest in a way. That's the way I took it anyway, because I'm thinking back to the tangerines at Tannadice, and disruption is surely part of the message making. And in the Jackie Husband stand, the full thing left to right, directly on the nose of where they're sitting as well. It just had an extra level of imagery associated to it, like across the other side of the pitch from one another, everything in unison. So yeah, another like nice step in the process, as it were. And I think we're all expecting there to be some sort of community. We've been saying that forever, haven't we? But the financials came out, as you kind of touched on at the intro earlier on as well. And yeah, like, it's just all silence in the Western Front, and yeah, good display at the weekend.
Brilliant. And again, it also rubber stamps the fact that this is a long process. I don't think anybody involved thought, we're going to go in the 12-minute and you're going to submit to all of our demands in the letter. I mean, why haven't they got back in touch with us? That's lazy. That's just really lazy. Any business in the world, and they do treat Celtic like a business, would undoubtedly get back to the people that actually buy the tickets and buy the merchandise and have a passion for the club, which we all do. They've not got back to us. They've not answered any questions. They think that they could maybe just wait this one out, Chris. But what I think has happened here is the movement is like, no other movement at Celtic since the 90s, whereby so many people have come together. And we've been able to coordinate it because of where we are in 2025, if you're talking about technology that didn't exist back in the early 90s. And even if, in terms of the fan media, as part of that movement, as a subgroup, if you like, what the movement's got is almost their own media team. You know, they can send us a message, we share it to the group, if you like, and that could go out to hundreds of thousands of followers in an instant. So that this is all feeding in to the incredible work that the steering group are doing. I'm just delighted to be a small, tiny cog in the process, and will continue to be part of the process, Chris. Where do you see it going? I mean, obviously, it's going to be difficult to do anything in Belgrade, of course, but where do you see it going in terms of the club's response? There has to be a response now, doesn't there?
Well, yeah, you mentioned something earlier. You said the club operate like a business. But if you were to look at a retail or a manufacturing business that's getting so many bad reviews from their customers for their product or their output or their customer service, they would actively engage with their customers, right? Now, I don't mean any disrespect by referring to Celtic supporters like us as customers, but the fact is that we buy merchandise, we buy tickets, we you buy travel packages, we wear all that sort of stuff. So we are customers in that regard, right? And we are paying for or buying into a product or a service. In this case, it's the football operation in the term. I just think that the board at the moment, or certainly the club hierarchy, I think they're missing a trick by not engaging, right? Because that would go a long way to starting to rebuild the bridges, which at this point, I mean, I wouldn't say they've been burned. I say they're probably napalmed at this point between supporters and the hierarchy. But by doubling down and going more insular, you're inviting more scrutiny, you're inviting more frustration, you're inviting more bad PR. And that, for me, just flies in the face of any kind of good marketing or PR strategy that I've ever been involved in. And apologies for moving away from the football side on that. Where it's going, I think momentum has to be maintained on our side, in terms of the movement. I think, we have to maintain as much as possible the distinction between supporting the team on the park and the manager and what we're seeing on the field, making sure that we're not doing anything detrimental to the team. But I think continually to emphasise what we would like to see from the club hierarchy and club direction. And it's not as simple to say we want those three out, and I know that was the crux of the process. But what we're saying is, look, because of the way you guys are operating, this is why you're under so much scrutiny and getting why it's so targeted. Come out and tell us why that shouldn't be the case. Come out and give us something back. See, just show a willingness to engage, right? And then we can talk about what that looks like and what good represents for this movement. But until they take that first step, I can't see anyone being satisfied with the response.
If they have brought in fact, we know they've brought in a consultancy. We know that, right? Yep. That's information that we've got. They brought in a consultancy to deal with this. They would need to go against the consultancy, because anybody independent coming into this situation would tell them to engage with their fan base. And I'm going to disagree slightly with you, Chris, because I think we're treated like customers. But when you think about your introduction to this football club, like Celtic for me has been omnipresent. It was never a choice. It never will be a choice. I remember reading a great book by Richard Purden where he interviews Jim Kerr. And Jim Kerr said, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can change just about anything in your life. You can change your surname, you can change your wife, your religion, your political party. But one thing you don't change is your football club. And I absolutely 100% agree with Jim Kerr, the Simple Minds frontman. We're here in the heart of the Barras. They recorded a video at the Barrowlands, and it was on the back of that the Barrowlands became a music venue. And when I think about that, I think about my own upbringing and the bond that you have with your old fella who's taking you to the games, and it's your thing with your dad and all this kind of. I mean, they've written books about this. The connection you have to a football club is different to a connection that you have with a restaurant or a superstore or where you buy your grub or your bacon or your meat or whatever. So they treat us like they're selling us a pound of beef, but they're not. It's not about that, and I think that's where the disconnect starts, Chris. I don't care who the CEO of Tesco is. There are other superstores available. I don't care who they are, right? But I care who the CEO of Celtic is, because it's our football club.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think that's where Cornell thoughts on this as well. But I agree. I think they're treating us like customers, as you say, but they're treating us badly, as customers. But I agree. I think from my perspective, and I think most of the supporters, we don't see ourselves as customers. You're right. We see ourselves as lifeblood, quite rightly, at the club. Supporters have always been there from the formation of the club. The supporters have always been there. And I agree with you. I mean, the bond I've got with my own father, it's like our main topic of conversation, even at this, so many years later. We always have Celtic to fall back on and talk about, and you have that common ground, and a lot of the memories you have is going to going to the bar before the game and having your wee pint, and then going in and you meet your uncles, you meet your pals, and all that kind of stuff. And it's and the biggest regret in my life at the moment is giving up my season ticket when I had to move away. And I didn't want to deprive someone else of a season ticket. Now I wish I'd have been a selfish git and kept that, to be honest. But I didn't, and now I can't get a season ticket back. So, again, another benefit of fan media, I get to talk about Celtic with other people and like yourself, and meet the commenters and stuff like that. But that's what Celtic is. It becomes an intrinsic part of your life, and I would just like the hierarchy to recognise that, to actually recognise the value of supporters. That's not pound signs, it's not a wallet, it's not next year's financial statement. The supporters are what makes the club special.
Yeah, without a doubt, Chris. And the experiences you get from the football are unlike any other. I liken them to experiences in a crowd at a gig or a festival where there's a moment where all the energies are aligned, and it's incredible. You get that at the football. Where else do you get it? Where else do you get that kind of that emotional vibe from life? It's difficult for me to think about Celtic as a business because it's far more than a business. I don't want to. This is basically an example of Acsom has to be more than an hour a day, because I've not even got through a third of the stuff that I wanted to talk about, and we're almost finished. And I can't finish talking about the board, Quinny. I want to talk about our front line. So you've got a man of the match performance and a goal from our left winger. You've got a goal from our right winger. And you've got some nice build-up play from our centre forward. But how do we start on Wednesday night, Quinny?
Good question. I would just say, first of all, I'm not mad pressed for time. If we do run over, it's no deal to me. I know you've maybe got stuff on, but just you
might have seen the shadow work going on behind me. People have been building a set for this as Acsom. Yeah. I think they're away for a coffee.
So in terms of how do we line up for Wednesday, well, Rodgers was quite clear. Again, some great questions came in this week's press conference. Very, very clear that Alaquisha is a left winger. We tried him at right wing. That won't be happening again. And he went further on to say that Dyson is a left winger or a striker and won't be playing right wing essentially as well. So in terms of how we line up for Wednesday, we've got two nice options, you would think, between all of that for left wing and centre forward, between Taneke Balaquisha, Maeda Iheanacho. And you do feel that will be the kind of Brendan Rodgers A and the B, the guys that start and the guys that finish. It's the right wing that is just a huge, huge question mark for me, because, how does Rodgers approach the game and what does he want to get out of whoever's starting on the right wing? Yang obviously scored at the weekend, played 90 minutes. We've seen things before from Rodgers where if someone like Yang plays 90 minutes in a game in particular, the next match, James Forrest or whoever else would get the 90 minutes, and there's a real kind of job share kind of feel around some of those positions. So I don't know how to read Yang's contribution at the weekend. Was he getting 90 minutes because everyone knows you're not going to play Wednesday, so you'll get your 90 minutes here, and the minutes that they're managing across the games will kind of pan out? Or is that to get him up to speed for it? Because it did feel that as much as Iheanacho was good, Dyson's going to be the main choice through the middle, isn't he? And so I don't think you could really read into the front three from the weekend of a starting three and a finishing three, although that's the way it went, but I don't think that will be the way it configures for Wednesday. So I think Taneke, Dyson are nailed on to play. It's the right wing is a real head scratcher. And I recorded my preview for it. It'll be out tomorrow. I already did a full Europa League preview on Seltzer here a few weeks ago, looking at all the opponents we've got and whatever. But I started to kind of float out the idea on the video that'll be out tomorrow of maybe Negren playing right wing. I know Rodgers doesn't fancy how he's quite narrow in that position, but you can see how I lay it out. And, I think it wouldn't shock me if Negren did play right wing from the start on Wednesday.
Good shout. I remember when we were looking at Negren initially coming in, the title of the show was Kuhn out, Negren in. It was almost like a like for like. And then through his decent performances in midfield, I kind of went off the idea, Quinny. But I think it does come down to a throw of the dice between him and Yang. Forrest is a great option off the bench, obviously, but it also opens up that ability to bring in Annie Engels, who has performed well in Europe as well, Quinny. So I think it's a good shout. Let us know what you think in the comment section. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. I know my backdrop has been slightly different today from the usual bookshelf, but thanks, everybody, for sticking with us. Thanks, everybody, for your support. I'll be sharing the link so that if you fancy it, you can give us a wee vote and send us down to Elland Road, hopefully with a chance of winning a wee trophy and bring it up the road. It's absolutely appreciated by everybody who's involved, and all the great work that everybody does and puts in, and all the time that they put into it as well. Chris was on yesterday, he's back on the day, he'll be back on Wednesday night. It's just tremendous. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And again, come and join us again tomorrow. I know that a lot of people have just started tuning into Acsom, so we're live every day at 12:30 for an hour. Very soon we'll be broadcasting live from the studio at the same time, and we'll all be in having our croissants and hot chocolates in the studio and all that kind of stuff. What are you laughing at, Chris? I could buy you a custard slice if you want. I'll buy you a custard slice.
I just want to make sure you get someone in to fix
It's
my
gone.
game before I go on. So, you know,
well, you're pushing it. Yeah, we do have a mirrored room for you, Chris, that you can go in. Make sure it's brilliant from every angle.
It'll be broken by the time I walk in.
Well, thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Come and join us tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.
Here we go, guys.